So how do you define yourself as a leader?
I think the characteristics that I use to define a good leader are that you're honest, you're ethical, you're hardworking and fair. And I kind of operate on the credo that you treat others as you want to be treated.
Mhm. Okay. Now, in terms of your success, do you feel that you planned it? Did you have something written down? What does your journey look like?
I don't think anybody totally plans their life out from A to B. And so I certainly didn't have a plan. I knew I was good at certain things and went after things I was good at. And one of the things I was good at was change and execution of projects. And so my jobs choices, my role choices have always been to take a job you can never get, and usually where there's complex change or some sort of radical transformation going on. And that's the type of roles I took on. And so I also try to work across disciplines because, and what I mean by that is I have a finance, risk, ops, and tech background. And by being across those disciplines, you have a more interesting career because you're not just in a functional group, you're working across to make change happen. And that's what drove me in my choices. So the roles I've taken are more the difficult ones, more the ones you can never get, and more where there's multiple disciplines involved.
Now, any specific challenging obstacles that you faced that you felt shaped sort of how you have become as a leader today?
Yeah, very early I was running my own little company, and I saw some pretty slimy behavior by some people,
Mhm.
and affected me when people didn't pay, affected me when people didn't deliver on promises, affected me when you know contracts were tendered but jobs were not awarded, that type of thing. And so I took at that point a resolve to not be that type of person. And so that drove me to be honest and ethical and hardworking, but also to be a little more wary about what people are doing and that they don't necessarily do what they say they're going to do. And so that's a very important principle for me, is that people deliver on their promises and do what they say they're going to do. Um, I was also take roles that allow me to work strategically and then tactically and then operationally. And the reason I do that is because that's where the fun is. Like, anybody can come up with a strategy, but not a lot of people can execute.
Right.
And so the joy is actually getting the strategy executed. And you could have death by PowerPoint where someone's got some nice glossy strategy, but it really can't work until you get into the disciplines and the technical details to get it to work. And so that's where the hard work actually occurs. And that's where the fun actually is, because that's when you have to get creative. That's when you have to get determined and have persistence.
Yeah, no, that resonates a lot with me. Right around the execution has to be disciplined. Doesn't just happen. Now, if you were to go back 10 years in your career, is there a specific leadership attribute that you changed compared to how you are today?
I think I'm doing more listening and more reading and more pondering because the world is changing so quickly.
Mhm.
So whereas before the road forward was more straightforward, there was less nuance, there were fewer options.
Mhm.
Um, Now you have to actually weigh more options and address more nuance.
Mhm.
So in 1989, which is a long time ago, I wrote a practice plan for a risk practice without even thinking about the complexity of it. And that was before a consulting-based risk practice ever existed. And it was just obvious to me that that's what I should be doing. And now, if you said you wanted to start a consulting practice, it'd be a far more meaty concern because of COVID, because of the world of digital, because the availability of information, and so the paths forward are less clear, and the costs and risks are less clear. So you really have to ponder what you're doing. So I try to read more, think more, ponder more before we make any significant change.
Now, if I were to ask, what is your strongest attribute from a leadership perspective? What would you say that is?
I think persistence.
Mhm.
persistence and honesty. So I probably don't give up too much. I keep trying until I succeed. Optimism is another characteristic, because you can get discouraged and you can fade away, or you can be persistent and optimistic and continue. And I think there's choices people make is the world glass half full, or is the world half empty? And I think the glass is half full, and there's always more to do, and there's more opportunity. So that frame of mind, that optimism, is important as you embark.
Now, of course, leadership is a decision. So from your perspective, what motivates you as you're going through challenges and obstacles and being the leader that you are today?
Hmm. Sometimes being a leader is just doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. So for me, doing the right thing is critical. So I had a group of people at one of the banks I was working at, and I led a large team. And they could see that I was stepping in harm's way by doing the right thing. The easy decision would have been to go along. The easy decision would have been to say yes. The easy decision would have been to put up with the status quo. Mm-hmm. And I think that's not leadership. Leadership is actually seeking the movement away from the status quo, mm-hmm. seeking the improvement, seeking the more difficult path is always is leadership in my mind. And so if you could just get along and have a good life, or you could try to make a needed change happen. And so making needed change happen is something that I think leaders need to do. Mm-hmm. So taking the tough choices, it's harder work, but being focused on the vision, the outcome, the objective, where you want to end up, that's what you need to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. And did you find that came naturally to you to like step up and do the right thing, or that's learned behavior as you go through your career?
Yeah, well, because I was a consultant for a long time, people wanted my opinion, and I was always giving my opinion in unvarnished ways. Mm-hmm. And so I find it very difficult to mislead people, and very difficult to make it gray. It's mm-hmm. kind of black and white. And so I had a boss ask me one day, says, "Why can't you make that just a little gray?" No, that's not what I do. And he says, "You're not going to make that more consumable by the audience by making it gray." I said, "No, actually, because it's a choice. It's do the right thing or mm-hmm. don't do the right thing. It's not so." And so that is more of a personal characteristic that I think it's important to be comfortable in your skin and comfortable with yourself to do the right thing.
Now, in terms of the team itself, that's a huge part of motivating and driving. Do you find that you're having to change some of your leadership style, considering we're in, a pandemic right now, or you feel like it's the same?
Yeah. So I think team building is very important. Looking at each individual in the team, looking at their raw skills, looking at their capabilities, looking at their desires, looking at what they want, and figuring out how to get the most out of them without being coercive, of course. I think people, if you get their hearts and minds working for you, you don't have to, it's easier. You don't have to tell. Mm-hmm. You don't have to tell them what to do, give them the task. You say, there's the objective. There's what we need to achieve. I'm going to support you. How do you think we should get there? And I get more out of my teams by asking them to solve for the problem than telling them what to do to solve the problem. And I think you can be a tell leader, but I'm not a tell leader. I'm a inspire, kind of talk to, set the goal, set the vision, and then work really hard with people to get the job done. Mm-hmm. So some leaders are, step back and say, well, it's all on the team. Well, no, it's not all on the team. You have to listen to your team, figure out what the team needs, and make sure you provision the team with the right equipment, the right attitudes, the right behaviors, the right resources to execute the job.
Now, in terms of, if I were to ask you, what is the one thing that makes you the most proud as a leader around something that you've accomplished, what would that be?
It's not about a specific accomplishment. It's probably that I am a straight shooter. And
Mhm.
so people expect me to give them good advice. And so I will ponder a problem and think about the best answer. And then I will give them my opinion and my advice. And I think I like to solve complex, messy problems. So that's what I'm known for.
Mhm.
Something where the answer is not so obvious, not so plain, not so out in the open. And so I like to be trusted for my opinion and my recommendation and my execution.
Now, if I were to say, what is the one piece of advice you would give to sort of the next generation of leaders? What would that be?
Be true to yourself. Find something that you are very passionate about
Mhm.
and have the capability to do and step into it.
Mhm.
Like it takes 1,000 hours of study to become an expert is the general stat. Spend 1,000 hours, do the work. Or I
Mhm.
think it's 10, sorry, I think it's 10,000 hours. It takes 10,000 hours to become an expert.
Mhm.
Hard work and determination are what dividend you. There is no free lunch. There is no shortcut. It's
Mhm.
all about the work you put in, the effort you put in to make sure you're prepared.
Mhm.
I'm watching my three kids in school work hard
Mhm.
and work harder than I think they originally anticipated in their education to complete their education in COVID. Well,
Mhm.
they'll remember this time as a time they had to dig deep to get their education completed and their education done.
Mhm.
It's not the same as sitting in a classroom, but those who invest the time and invest the effort will succeed.
Now, what do you feel the role is in terms of tackling the challenges that we're facing with diversity and inclusion in the workplace? What should the role of a leader be? Does it need to be something different or?
Yeah, diversity is not the problem,
Mhm.
it's the requirement. So actually thinking about who you need and the skills you need and the composition of the team and the diversity of thought you need
Mhm.
and going and getting that is the job of a leader, making sure you have the right skills to succeed. There's a phrase I use called the prerequisites for success. And you actually have to identify what those prerequisites are and make sure the team has it or your team will fail.
Mhm.
So I had a small team in one of my consulting practices. And in that small team of about 15 people, we had 27 languages,
Mhm.
which is pretty impressive for a small team. And they could do anything. So I could tell them we need to figure out X, and we'd band together, we'd figure out X. And it was a very creative, very dynamic team with lots of diversity. And I think diversity is not a thing you go after; it's a
Mhm.
requirement you need.
Now, finding the balance, right, as a leader as well is just as important. So, how do you find that balance? What do you do in your spare time to create that?
Well, I golf, and I have lots of hobbies to fix things. Last summer, this whole COVID time, I built a dock,
Mhm.
and so that's a big project, lots of concrete. So you got to step away and have. I used to call it dock therapy. You would step away and build the dock and let the mind wander. And you know, uh, I don't watch a lot of TV.
Mhm.
I'm more out. I also I'm just more physically active than probably other guys, and not in a got to be an athlete, got to compete way, but just trying to stay physically fit because healthy body and healthy mind are pretty rare to come by. So you got to exercise both and keep them both in good shape. Um, yeah,
One of the things we keep hearing a lot about right now, I mean, and I know COVID has accelerated it, but this whole gist around just being digital, automating everything versus rethinking business models that we have in the industry. So, any recommendations around how leaders need to think differently as they work through this?
yeah. So I've done a lot of work in this area.
Mhm.
So before, when you started to change your business model, you would have a process team and a technology team and a data team,
Mhm.
and they would solve for their discrete functional discipline. Right
Mhm.
now, because of robots, because of business process management, because of automation, because of microservices architecture, because of orchestration of business services because of client journey requirements and employee enablement requirements, you can no longer approach a problem as a discrete functional group. You have to approach it with integrated process, data, technology, and client service. So that solution set that everybody's searching for requires a fundamental rethink in how you solve for your business model. Your business model is not a tech stack and a data stack and a people stack. The assets you have are the people, the processes, the technology, and the data. So those assets need to be reconfigured in service of the customer or enablement of the employee. And so that science of how you do that is the new world of change. And it's no longer functional, it's more very well integrated. The other thing that's happening is there are so many tools that didn't exist before that are very enabling. So there's software development kits and tools that allow you to become citizen programmers and citizen developers. And if you really spend some time at it, you could learn Java, you could learn Angular, you could learn these languages that we need to make business processes work in front of the customer. And so I think there's the desire to learn, but also the desire to look at new frameworks and tools to execute.
Now, any book that you would recommend to me from a leadership perspective that you feel would challenge me or that you think is worth me spending the time to read?
I think a leadership book, the Cotter series of books on leadership, he's a Harvard professor, is a good series of books. I think there's a book, I think it's from Elia Goldratt, I think, called The Goal. I may have his name a little bit wrong, but that book is a thought-provoking book. When you actually start solving a problem in that book, it keeps coming back to what is your goal? What is your objective? And one of the things I always generally do is have a goal or an objective. I may not achieve it on the first time or the second time, but I always know where I'm trying to get to. Because if you start to wander, like a good plan acted on today is better than a perfect plan acted on tomorrow. But if you actually have a goal, you won't waste your time because you're going, I'm trying to get there. Now, how do I get there? Versus if you just start your journey without a destination, you may not get to your destination.
Now, if you had an opportunity to write a book around your leadership, either what would it be about or what would it be called?
Yeah, I think what's missing from leadership science, there's lots of books that are out there. A lot of them are not very useful. I think the book on empathetic leadership or capturing people's hearts and minds would be the book. And how to connect with people who are on your teams to enable the teams to perform or to become high performing. I think less work has been done in that area about how you actually connect to the passion of individuals in teams to get work done. You can get a lot done if you connect people and get their hearts and minds engaged. And that's what the book should probably be on.
Now, if I put you on the Time magazine cover, what would you love it to say?
I think it should say, nice guys don't always finish last.
Right.
And the reason I'd say that is because some people take some shortcuts and some people are dishonest and some people are disingenuous. Some people play politics, and that's human nature, some of it. But I think good leaders don't. They don't forego the treatment of an individual in front of them to achieve an objective. They figure out how to achieve an objective with the individuals in their team, and they don't treat people badly. Right. And so I think nice guys can finish first. But I of course acknowledge there's many examples of nice guys not finishing first. But I'd like that to be the title.
Right. Okay. No, I like that. And then my last question is around, if I asked you to give a quote, that would be your legacy as a leader. What would that quote be?
I think for me, it would be do the right thing. Your team will thank you. So there are many times where I had people telling me that you're taking the harder route. You could have just said yes and carried on and not done the right thing. But I think sometimes the right thing is actually convincing people of the merit of your ideas And that's where the change agenda comes in. And
Mhm.
so convincing people that it's useful to make a change and practical to make a change and important to make a change, that's what I think we need to do. And that's usually doing the right thing, which is not always easy.